If you're new in the channel, welcome. Here we talk about how you can build things fast and reliable all using AI. And often enough, we have to search for data, so scraping is an often topic. But here's the problem. Every time that I'd create a specific thing to fetch for data, so let's create this box right here. This would be my Next.js app. And a good example for that is this right here. So airank.dev. What I want is for this website to be focused on builders as well. So whenever you want to know which is the best current LLM, you'd go to this website. For that, I need benchmarks. And one of the most important benchmarks we have is the web dev arena. We can't really get all this data from an API or something, so the way to go is just to scrape it. Now I need to have some kind of recurrency. When am I going to scrape this? When should it activate and scrape it again and again? So each hour, each day, every week. For this case, every day should be just fine. And whenever you talk about recurrency, what you might immediately think about are crons. And running a cron inside of Next.js just really isn't a good idea, despite it running inside of Node as well. You'd have to think that this instance of Next.js is running right now. So if I save a document, for example, then explaining it really roughly, it's like you would trigger the cron again. So let's suppose this is the timeline where you started your app. And then at this point right here, you saved a file or something was rebuilt inside of Next.js. So another cron would start working. And then this would kind of overlap with the previous cron. So you'd kind of have two crons running. Of course, you can always build your way out of this situation. But for the longest time, I just prefer having a server. And things would work kind of like this. I already have a Next.js server that connects with the database, gets all the data, and then brings back to my Next.js. And then I would have a server that would run a cron. So cron. This cron would fetch inside of LM Arena for the data that I need, and then update my database with that new data. This way, I'd have a service working only to fetch for that specific data and populate my database all just fine. But then recently, exactly when I needed to fetch the data from the web dev arena table, I thought to myself that it would be extremely stupid to create a server just to do this. So immediately I remembered about Vercel. Because if you've ever deployed anything inside of Vercel, went over to settings, and then down here in the Cron Jobs, you'll notice that they have a specific way of fetching, of hitting that endpoint and getting a cron job executed. And the way they do it is like this. You'd have an API endpoint inside of your Next.js app. This API endpoint would work and do exactly the same things as your server. The difference is that now, instead of having this connection to the database, we can completely delete this and have this server, which is actually Vercel, just communicate over to our API route whenever we set it to do that. Now, I have a really simple example that is hosted inside of Vercel just to show you, which is the AI Mafia app that it's as simple as setting up this vercel.json, which has an array of crons, and you can set it up exactly like this. The problem is that if you're in a free version from Vercel, you can only trigger a cron job every 24 hours. So if you need something to execute every hour, it just wouldn't work, and you'd have to get their paid plan. And also, if you've ever seen any other video, you understand that I really much prefer using a self-hosted instance inside of Hostinger along with EasyPanel. So how am I going to solve this if I'm not using Vercel and if I don't want to create another server with a cron job? The answer is using Chronicle. Now, I honestly didn't know this existed before, but to add it to your EasyPanel instance is as easy as going over to service, adding one, going to templates, typing in Chronicle, and here it is. Just hit create. As soon as you install it, the default username and password will be admin, at which as soon as you get to the panel, just go over to admin tab right here. Click on users. You'll find your account right here, which will be admin, and then click on edit and change your password right down here. After you're done with that, just head over to the schedule part. And here is where you'll add an event that will basically hit the endpoint every time that you decide. So event name, let's say like blah. And then for the timing, I could set it to every hour at 0 minutes, for example. And I'd also be able to select a timeout, which would be the max time allowed for the job to be completed. I can even set up a retry. I can configure a notification that would send me an email every time the cron job was successful, every time it failed. So yeah, there's just much more in here. And this is all free. You can just install it inside of your EasyPanel and have it trigger your scrape every single time. I was already editing when I realized I didn't really teach how to add the HTTP request inside of the event. So it's down here in this section where you can read plugin, then you should choose HTTP request. Probably it'll be a post, but you can get all this information by just sending this over to Claude. To trigger the Vercel scrape endpoint for the LM Arena website, how should I create the HTTP request? And this gives it full context, not full context, because the best way would just to give it this route right here. But a lot of people doesn't actually understand how to get to that point. So specifying it like this should be fine. And then I like to send over an image. This image is basically of this section right here, which gives it all the inputs that I'll need. Now, if you're wondering how to create this route to scrape the page, it's as easy as just asking Claude to use Vercel and scrape that given page using JSON. Honestly, you don't even need to use Vercel's MCP. You could just copy this page, just go over to features/scrape from the Vercel's documentation. Just click on copy page and then paste that as context inside of Claude Code. Now it gave me everything I need to work with. So method post, I could change this over to post. The URL should be this right here. And of course, if I've already deployed it, which in this case, obviously I did, make sure to change this to HTTPS and then place in your actual domain. So airank.dev, then /API/scrape/arena. That's all right. For the request headers, authorization bearer your scrape API key. So ideally, this should be in your environment variable for your project. This will compare with the API key that you have right here. It's also nice to have content type application/JSON. For the post data, nothing, timeout. 30 seconds should be fine for what I have right now. But if you're scraping something that takes longer, and usually some scrapes might take even longer than this, just increase this value to 90, for example. Follow redirects, I think, could be useful for maybe whenever you forget to type in the HTTPS or you have a www.airank. Overall, this can be just toggled off. Now, something really important that Claude Code didn't give us is the success match and error match. This is really important for it to understand when the request was successful or not. And I think it's smart enough to just understand this by me just sending over the image. It should look inside of my route, see what is the expected response. I can get that right here. So success true, place that in the success match, success false, just false. And that's how you can use Claude Code to gather the data and fill everything inside of Chronicle. So let me kind of draw out exactly how this is working. I have this server, which I'm just going to call Chronicle, that I can configure to run in a given time. So for my example, it's at 7 a.m. every single day. Then what it does is 7 a.m., it hits my endpoint. What my endpoint does is activate Vercel, have Vercel go over to LM Arena, bring me back all the data from this table. Now, the beauty about using Vercel for this example is that you can fetch the data already formatted in a JSON structure. Because this way, the only thing you really have to care about is passing over to Vercel what you need from which website, and then you go from an interaction with Vercel over to just inserting everything to your database. So it's actually just Vercel having a script that inserts all the data that you got from Vercel over to your database and updating it with that fresh new data. Right here in this completed tab, you can see everything that was already executed, all the completed jobs. And as you can see, I got some errors while testing it, but then today, 7 a.m., it successfully hit my endpoint and got back the data that it needed. If you click on the event name, you'll be taken to the event history, of which when you click on the job ID, you'll see exactly what went on during the execution for this task. Then for my database, I created a table called scrape that all it really does is tell me what it scraped, so LM Arena in this case, and then every time that it performed some kind of fetch, it logs exactly how it went. So success failed. If I order this placing the latest ones, I'll get this last update, which altered 48 rows, which is basically the amount of LM data I have in here, and allowed me to have my LM Arena table all updated with the fresh new scores. Now again, developer-wise, this might not be the best solution, but it's much, much better than placing yourself in a loophole of trying to implement Node Cron, for example, or even honestly paying for Vercel just to have the Cron feature. And I'd say the same thing about Firecrawl. Instead of going through that loophole of configuring Puppeteer to run perfectly inside of your server, having an additional server just to work with that scraping, if you just hit a route from your Next.js that uses Firecrawl under the hood to scrape whatever you need, it's just much faster. So yeah, just earlier today, I mentioned with my wife that I'd like someone to have told me about Chronicle some years ago. It would have made me not lose so much time. And I really hope that this video does that for someone out there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Till then.